Welcome, Kristianna, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Isha. I'm so excited.
Yes, me too. Me too. It's the timing is so perfect. And for those of you listening, we're recording this on August 23rd of 2021. And there's a lot going on globally, and it's a full moon. We're still in the full moon vibe. So what we share today is going to be really, it's going to dovetail really nicely with all that's going on. And so I want to introduce Kristianna Smith. They are an anti-racist facilitator, theater artist, intuitive, and queer Black mama, and a fabulous one. As the owner of Via Arts, she uses play and theater as a mechanism to dismantle institutional oppression and take up practices that move us closer to liberation. And most recently, Kristianna, you started the project Policy Through Play on Instagram and Facebook, which is, it seeks to decode local politics and give the general public the tools that they need to shift political practice towards a structurally care-centered world. I just want to say something about that because I have been reading your posts about that, and I'm learning so much about local politics through the little bit that I read. So you're really immersed in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And another thing is that you've used your social media platforms to explore the intersection of queer Black motherhood and pleasure, and asking the question, how do I hold freedom in a world that tries to keep it from me? And over the course of the pandemic, you've done like this, you've modeled for me, like being in your sensuality and resisting like the BS with your sensuality, showing up with such honesty in your sensuality and be like claiming it, like, yes. And so I really extend my appreciation for that.
Thank you so much. It started with just this, like, the only thing I can control in the middle of a lockdown is how much clothing I wear. Like, it really started there. It really just started with me being like, I can't leave my home, and I have no control over air, and I have no control over this virus, but I pick what I wear every freaking day. And so it really started there of like, oh, I actually have control over this body and how I feel in this body. And what's so interesting to me is that I think if you had asked me pre-pandemic, do you think you're a sexy person? I would have been like, yeah. But the discomfort that I have at the beginning of this year, I did them almost daily for a year.
Yeah. You did.
And so, which was like that was a labor at some point. And I was like, you know what, we're good. But I think if you had asked me at the beginning of that, do you think you're sexy? I would have been like, sure. But the discomfort I had was so real. And then by the end of it, I'm like, what's clothing? What's clothing? What's a nipple? Nobody cares. Like, it just like, it really, and I felt it. And there are days where I'm like, oh, I just need to go put on something sexy. Like, I'm not going to put it on Instagram, but I need to just go feel. And that there's power in that. There's like, there's a really, and what I saw mostly, especially as somebody who's born in a feminized body and was raised as a woman, is like, the assumption is that I'm doing this for men. And the reality for me always was that I was doing it for people who are like me, who grew up in bodies that for whatever reason were not seen as whole.
Yes.
And that the most pleasure I got from posting were when other women and queer and non-binary fat folks, Black folks were like, oh, I'm gonna do this too. Like, I feel sexy too. That like, it was actually that community that was so, and that when men folk were like, you look hot, I'm like, bitch, that's the point. Go away. Nobody asked. Nobody was confused. Like, go away, please. So yeah, it was such a really powerful experience. And it's a tool in my toolbox now of like rest and power.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love it. And it kept me alive. It kept me in touch with my aliveness. Like, this just goes to show, like, you showing up in your truth and in your pleasure and in your body, like, nourished other people. Like, it kept me connected to, like, my yes as well.
Yeah. Which was hard to do in a world of like lots of no.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is the whole work, like claiming our yes when everything in our environment says no to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you came today on the podcast to talk about the importance, the necessary, like, reality of rest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dreaming for surviving and thriving. So I'd like to invite you to share a little bit, like, your process to coming into this topic in particular, like your path, your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really starts, and I've been talking a lot about this. I'm actually doing a session about this later today. It starts with me acknowledging that grief is a thing, and that grief can't happen on a schedule, and that grief requires that I acknowledge it. And I think that the world that we live in, whatever part of the oppressive system you want to name, really thrives on us not experiencing grief.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I left my full-time job is when, like, the biggest parts of my transition as a human being and my practices happened, when I left my full-time job. And one of the biggest things that happened to me right after that was this period of grief where, like, I was like, I'm going to go start my own company, and I wasn't being productive in the ways that productivity is claimed to us.
Yeah.
I wasn't being successful in the ways that success is described to us. And I just felt so lost and pained. Like, I was really raw.
Yeah.
And so I slept a lot and and things were really hard for me. And then I got sort of curious, like, after that passed, and I kept doing things that I knew didn't feel good, right? Like, I would accept, like, a short-term job, and they'd be like, do you want to talk about being here longer? And I'd be like, absolutely not. So I just got curious about the things I wanted to get curious about. And I found myself inadvertently networking, inadvertently creating around me, not just work friends, but like a community of people. And that more and more opportunities, both professional and not, appeared from that.
Can I ask you what was coming up in that period of grieving after you left your full-time job?
Yeah. I was so used to, I got that job. That was like the first organization I had worked with after college.
Yes.
And I think I had gotten so used to being like, my name is Kristianna and I go to this university. My name is Kristianna and I'm this position at this organization, that when it came to I'm Kristianna, I felt lacking. Like, I just felt like I had import, I had influence, I had these things. I have this name that I've made up, right? Like, I have this via arts here, but like, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. Who am I if I'm not this role at this place?
Right.
Which I think that our society does not like us to think about or ask.
Yeah.
And so when I started asking that, the first and most readily available was, you're lazy, you're stupid, you're useless. Those were just the narrative that I had. You can't do anything right. You don't have anything to offer. That just was in my body.
Yeah.
And that I like to describe, sometimes I'm like, my relationship with that organization was an abusive relationship.
Okay.
In the way of, like, when someone leaves an abusive partner, I've never experienced an abusive partner, but I will tell you for sure that all the narratives around abusive partnership echo for me when I think of working for my role in that version of that organization.
Yeah.
And so really like, oh, like I am nothing without you. Right.
Oh my
I
God.
was only worthy because you were giving me da 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 da.
Right.
And so that was such a real feeling that I had. And that took me time to be like, well, fuck it. I'll still just try. Let's try. And then what happened for me is I kept showing up places. I kept being myself. I kept just like letting my curiosity sort of lead me into different rooms. I kept meeting new people who would invite me into places. And I was just myself. And I would hear people go, oh, she's amazing. And I was like, wait, what? Because I don't have anything here, right? Like I don't, and I still met people who were like, oh, you don't have anything. You don't have like an epitaph, like you don't have the thing. So there's no desk with your name on it. Who were like, but I met more and more people who just like really embraced me as myself and were like, no, just you are offering something.
Yes. Yeah. That
and
enoughness, right? You are enough.
You are enough. And that external enoughness really helped fuel and help me start to do some healing work around my internal critic and my internal shame and my like the internal stuff that I was just carrying around with me. Yeah. I started therapy after I left that job. I don't think I had space to do therapy, you know, before that. So I really invested in myself in a way that I had not even had the time to think about doing.
Yeah.
When I was like on the rat race of this is my organization, this is the stuff that I do. This is what survival is.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant. Like I was sort of like at the peak. I was sort of like peaking in my. People were like, "Hey, do you want to come here and do that?" And I got pregnant, and my body was like, "Nope." My body was like, "No, we're napping in the middle of the day. We are," and so those feelings came back. Look at you. You just can't look at all these working mothers. I was Googling like, do people take nap? How do people with full-time jobs take naps? I can't survive a day without a nap. How is this happen? Right. Yeah. And I found myself doing this thing that I'm always aware of because it's a pattern of learning of like, when I'm having difficulty, I try to go back to the system to see how the system would solve the problem for me. And I think the issue with that is like, I'm not in a full-time job because I want to be able to take a nap. Me taking a nap isn't a useless thing. I don't actually have to figure out what my productivity is in comparison to a person who is living a whole life that I don't want to live. And like, I have to reclaim and recreate my version of success to match the things that I actually want. Which means I have to figure out that sometimes it's like, I gotta go way back to figure out this problem. I have to get creative to figure out this problem, or I have to make different choices. Like one of the choices I've made is that I don't want a second child. And part of that is acknowledging like, I currently today do not have the support system to give me the things that I needed when I was pregnant the first time.
Yeah.
I barely have a support system to support raising my one child. And I'm not going to enter into a situation where I have to now figure out how do I take a nap and take care of a toddler at the same time? What does that look like? Yeah. That's not, you know, and that's a choice. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice for me. It feels like a really aligned choice. I can see how that might feel like a sacrifice for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I have to think about.
Yeah. And I really like that you brought the piece around, you know, feeling like your previous job was like an abusive relationship, and the process of leaving brought up all of this stuff that is both, right, that can be extrapolated or compared to, you know, an abusive relationship, but also a relationship to a system, right? Yeah. Like around how we adopt or how we form our identities via the work that we do. Yeah. Our worth is tied into our productivity or our roles or our titles. And that some people actually expect that, like, oh, what's your title? Or what, you know, what are the letters after your name? Yeah. And really sort of teasing apart what is me, what is truly me, essential me, and what is a role
that I'm in? What is it that I do professionally, right? And some people, for some people that is really combined. And I love you naming the process of like the emotional process of teasing those apart.
Yeah. And I think that there's like to me, there's such an acknowledgement that happened around parts, right? Like that I am multiple roles, and that there's my background stems from theater. So there's always an actor. There's always a person putting on those roles. And I think in all of the systems, we have such an attachment to role of worker or community member or mother or partner that we lose who is the person doing those things and what does that person need.
Yes.
Right. And as a Black woman, as a queer woman, as a parent, as someone who just does not subscribe to, oh, this is how it has been, so this is how it will be. I don't like, first of all, I think that's a lie, but I think it's so important that I stop and go like, I actually just need a fucking break. I actually need a break. I need, hey, husband, I need you to go take the baby away so I can masturbate, because that's what I need. I need to just go outside and cry in my car. I need, like I as a human have needs.
Yes.
And if I'm thinking about role of mother has a to-do list. Role of, facilitator has a to-do list. Role of community member has a to-do list. But the needs reside in the person who fills those roles.
Yes.
The needing place is always here, right?
Yes.
Because if I'm going to talk about I need as a mom, I'm going to say like I need a shopping list. I need, you know what I mean? Like I need, I need 10 minutes to do this. It's not a need that fulfills the human being that is performing those roles.
Right.
And so I think it's really important for me to go, who is me again? Mm-hmm. What does me need? And sometimes, and lots of times, especially in pandemic and, living, we're hitting another wall. There was like a 6-month wall that happened sort of at the end of last year. I can feel us all hitting another wall of this is still happening. It's getting worse. Like all of whatever the world is giving to us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that need is I just need to sit. I just need to be silent. I just need to not have my phone and not have a request of me. And I just need stillness. And like word up to the Nap Ministry if you follow any of her stuff.
Love it.
Because she has been such a light for me, like in really, like, again, that external affirmation of sitting on your ass is worthwhile.
Yes.
You actually don't need anything. You don't need to do anything.
Permission granted.
If you needed somebody to tell you you could take a nap, you can take a nap, right? And recently, and I don't know what this user's name is, but somebody on TikTok spoke about, he was like, if we believe in generational wealth, we should start believing in generational time off, paid time off. And therefore, if you have generational wealth that you've accrued through time, because of what stuff your ancestors did.
Yes.
My ancestors who worked in fields, did their time, never had a day off. Therefore, the accrual of paid time off for me and all of us we're good.
Yeah. You're done. Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's a really important distinction around need, right? Because if we speak about need from the role that we're in, it's going to be a task, as you said, but not the deeper attuned need from the body that says, like how you work with sort of what is emerging in the body. Mm-hmm. I need a rest, or I need to eat something really healthy, or I just need to be alone, or I need to cry in my car, right? Whatever it is like the human need underneath all of the roles that you play. Yeah, I love that distinction. It's really important to reiterate that, because I think most people live in, what do I need right now? Well, I need you to do the dishes.
Right. Right.
You know? Yeah.
And following that, because to me, acknowledging rest, acknowledging grief actually helps get us, again, like my work is as an artist. And one of the things I've been teasing on a somatic level is the difference between anxiety and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And that anxiety happens in a state of survival. And the purpose of anxiety is to get us to a safe place. So we're always going to do, maybe it's an unconventional path, but we're trying to get to a known thing. We're trying to get somewhere we know we are. That's what anxiety is doing in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Creativity happens in a relaxed state.
Yes.
And creativity allows us to think about things we haven't done before.
Yes.
And creativity goes like, what might happen if what could be if how might I? It's just like, can I follow? Yeah. Can I just follow that? Right. And so when I've processed my grief, now that thing isn't blocking me anymore, or I can at least see it when it shows up and go like, hey, okay, when I've rested, all of these things are giving me access to an actual relaxed state. And from that relaxed state, my real curiosity has the capacity to grow. My real curiosity can say, I wonder what it would be like to go to this thing. Or I wonder, maybe I should just have a conversation with this person. And as an intuitive person, I think that also gets you in contact with all of the things, right? Like whatever you want to, whether that's you're remembering, whether that's like somebody encoded in that your DNA, like you're suddenly a lot more attuned and in tune to what I love that you call them downloads. And I love that. Like you're ready to take those on.
Yeah.
Because you've cleared the space for them. You
open the space to receive. Yeah.
And it's so often capitalism goes, okay, well do this thing and then you can succeed. Right. And like that's not true. It's not true on a body level.
Yeah.
Right. I can't just like ignore my grief and be like, okay, I'll deal with that later. Let me do some creative masterpiece now. Yeah. It's like the through the grief, the through the rest, the through. Yes. In my work as a facilitator, I call it composting. You know what I mean? It's like I can't eat this like this, but I can let it exist and rot and deal so that maybe something else can grow from it.
Yeah. And this process you name is so important because for our collective evolution, right? For the movement forward, if you want to call it a forward movement of humanity, because it's like when we are in a state of anxiety, right? When we need to sort of just get to safety, we are in our defenses, we are in our patterns, we are just repeating what we know and not discovering or opening or uncovering. Yeah. Right? Like we're not in the now, we're in a past, and we're sort of paving the road of the future with the past, versus what you're talking about here is opening that space for what can be. And it's so, and I'm going like this because I'm just opening my hands.
Yeah.
Because it is like, oh, I get to have like a bigger field of vision and imagination and creativity, and maybe think of things that haven't been created before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And saying that you were like, oh, let me see how the system's doing it and see like, what can I create that's different, that is really just born from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like born, and like, I just always like to honor, like born from unknowing, right?
Yes.
And there are people in my life and in my genes and in my being that did this shit in ways that I have not been taught, but I might know.
Yeah.
That there might be memory in my,
yes, in the cells.
In the cells.
Yeah.
And so there's also a way to, and I feel really called to say this. So like, I'm a parent of a toddler. This shit is fucking hard, right? Like this moment, I live in 800 square feet with another adult person that is also working. me working and a toddler with no yard unless we get into a car, right? And I want to name that because I think sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful to think of this idea of doing things different. Sometimes different is just the process of surviving and resting. Like,
Yes.
and like when people use emergence, I feel like they think like, yeah, and then like shit doesn't just grow all the time, right? Like, it's like if I have a plant, sometimes that plant has one flower and I'm like, oh my God, it's a flower. And it's like the rest of the time the plant is just surviving and I'm
Yeah.
watering it. And
Yeah.
we're, and so I really want to own both as self-accountability, that I am not every day waking up my best self. I'm not every day waking up like, let me put on lingerie and take a picture of myself in the mirror and then go say something brilliant because I'm just living my perfect life. I'm living my best life. And my best life is that I still can't handle when my kid has a tantrum. And my best life is still that I am just so frustrated and exhausted that I'm like, I don't know, go on the iPad. Like, I don't, we are sometimes still in survival. And that again brings me back to the need, which is like, in order to be the type of parent and partner and human that I want to be, sometimes I have to do things that don't feel like Instagrammable because I need 10 more minutes of sleep, or I need to just breathe. And so sometimes it's like, all of my dishes are dirty and my laundry isn't folded, but I'm saying to my whole family, like, get your asses in the car. We're just going to go take a walk somewhere. We're actually going to leave the whole house in disarray, because what we need right now is a reset, and we reset when we go outside. That's how my family resets. And so my dishes aren't done and my kid is in stained clothes, and maybe I have not showered, but I'm going to go outside and breathe air. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I have the capacity for today.
Yeah.
And that's so necessary, I think, to name as well, because I think sometimes people go, how could I even get to a place where I'm thinking differently? I'm just trying to survive this. And my belief is that if we really took the time to rest when we needed rest, to pause when we needed pause, to not shame ourselves into making the easier choice, that those moments of emergence where we see like, oh, I could just do one thing a little bit closer to my goal, right?
Yeah.
One thing on 1 week. For this 10 minutes, I was actually my ideal self. That's actually the process to get to a point where most of your time you can be there. It isn't like one day I wake up and I rested yesterday and I grieved all my things and now that's done and now I'm perfect. It's a continuous process of a little bit at a time. And you're constantly being pulled back. I'm constantly pulled back into my survival mechanisms. I'm constantly pulled back into my circuit rewiring. And I have to go, okay, do I need to sit with my tarot? Do I need to go to therapy? Do I need to just cry? Can I check in on my needs?
That question, right? How often do we ask that question of ourselves? What do I need right now? I'm always saying that to my clients, like, ask yourself, what do you need right now? And dropping that question into the body and really listening for the answer and then following.
And like, for the other parents, because you're a parent as well, but like, sometimes that means that the thing that you're going to do, you might not post about. I really just want to stress, right?
Yes.
You saw somebody's highlights out here that every day they cut 5 cucumbers for their kid, and they set up 10 craft stations, and like, whew, I'm so happy that those people do that for their kids. I cannot do that every day, right? So sometimes it might be that you go to McDonald's for your food if that's what you had to do today. Sometimes it might be that your kid is just getting an array of snacks, because that's how you can feed them. Sometimes it means you're doing a real lazy game to interact with them.
Yes.
And especially now, because one of the things that I come back to with my husband is that our 3-year-old is not supposed to only have us as social people, right? My 3-year-old is actually supposed to be in and among other children. And we're in a situation where we're a high risk household. My kid is I'm vaccinated and they are still nursing, but they are not fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
And there's a danger to both them and to the household.
Yes.
If they're, so this isn't normal. Like we're doing this and like sometimes we just have to stop because again, capitalism and those, like our country right now wants us to be like, this is totally normal. It's totally fine that lots of people are dying. It's totally cool that lots of people are sick. Like just go to work. It's good. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
You know, and I have to stop and go like, this is not normal. We are working at diminished capacity. There's a lot of what we're doing right now that is survival for us. Yes, it's exhausting for 2 adults to interact with a 3-year-old. This 3-year-old's supposed to have a bunch of other 3-year-olds that match their energy level and they're running around. And like, that's actually what we're supposed to be doing. We just don't have access to that right now. And so we have to be kind and loving to ourselves and not shame. You know, I don't think that I am the parent that I envisioned myself being. I'm also not living in the world that I envisioned parenting in.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And the piece around shame is really big because we, you know, you and I both talk a lot about how systems live in our bodies. And when I talk about systems, when you talk about systems, we're talking patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, right? You know, and others. And shame is a huge, like in terms of like how capitalism and white supremacy and colonialism for that matter live within us is through shaming, is by making us wrong for being human, having human needs, responding to our humanity, expressing our humanity, you know, so you know, maybe say something about that and then we can talk a little bit about unworking and rewilding.
I would love to. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that so part of my work is as an anti-racist facilitator, which is code for like trying to get white people to do better. Like, I'm just going to be really honest that's right. Yeah. And then part of my work is as a creative, which I think is also code for like trying to get people who get it, Black, queer, marginalized people, trying to like help hold space for those folks as they like are obviously doing it. And shame comes up all the time, right? Shame comes up like, I'm ashamed I haven't assimilated. I'm ashamed I have hurt someone because I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I'm ashamed. Like, I'm ashamed that I'm not right, but I'm ashamed that being right has made me wrong. Like all of this shit. Yeah. That's really tied to like, you think there's a perfect way to be, and there's not. Sorry. Right. And so I have had people ask like, well, what do I do with that? What do I do with shame? And I'm like, you just say hi. Like, I don't like, what do I do when shame shows up for me? I just go, hey, and I ask myself, what are you doing here? Yeah. What's your actual purpose right now? And most of the time, shame is showing up to say, are you doing this the best you can? Are you doing this? Are you sorry? Have you made amends for the thing that you did? Or why aren't you like this other thing? Mm-hmm. And when I can have a conversation with my shame, then I can go, actually, this is the best I can do right now. This is the best I can do. This McDonald's drive-thru is the best I can do right now. I can, you know, I can say like, oh, maybe I haven't made amends. Let me see what I can do. Is repair possible? Is there something I can do? Or is it just that I have to do more reflection work? Or when it's like, why aren't you being like this? I'm like, bitch, I was never gonna be like that anyways. Bye.
I love those 3 questions. That is such a wonderful way to approach. Like, you know, I often think of like our bodies or our psyches as homes. And then, you know, shame walks through the door and sits on the rug in the middle of the living room. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing here? And those are 3 wonderful questions to ask in response to that, you know, little shame coming into the door. Yeah. 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 Great.
And I just like I just want to say like most of the time when actually look in the same way that when you acknowledge your grief can go like, okay, I'll go rest. And then you have access to joy. A lot of times when you acknowledge your shame and you two have a combo, it's like, oh, you good? Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to be here. Eat. Bye. Right? Like, it's like all of a sudden you're like, what's going? And then it does. So like, that's why I think it's such an important process. And like, just naming what is so powerful. And we are really taught out of that.
Yes.
And so it's like reteaching ourselves to just name what is, which I think does come into unworking.
Yes, totally. Yeah, go ahead.
So
go for it.
So unworking is something that Isha and I are doing together with Erin Livensberger on land that she stewards. And it's 12 hours. It's going to be 12 hours of self-directed existing is like sort of how we've talked about it. So there will be plenty of opportunities to do things, but it's really it's really like intentional time to rest, and then if you've moved through your rest or grieve or whatever it is that you have to do, then be curious and like really just follow your curiosity for a little bit throughout the day, but giving yourself just a whole beautiful amount of time to really experience and start the process of deprogramming from traditional 9-to-5 oppressive systems. We're not going to do it all in one day. It's but it's just like a shock to the system of like, actually the only thing you have to do is be here, show up, and let the rest happen. And it came about with a conversation between Erin and I, where I was talking about, we were talking about unschooling, which unschooling, if you're not familiar, is the process of like taking your kids out of traditional schools and then just letting them sort of like figure out how they learn. So you don't do anything. It's not like creating curriculums or you just like let them see what they do, right? And for me, that was the similar process that I did coming out of a traditional work environment, was like, how do I work? How do I work? What does work feel like to me? What does productivity actually mean for me? What are what are sort of the pieces that I believe are, what is success, right? Like we're always coming back to what's success really going to look like for me. And so the idea of unworking and rewilding is like giving ourselves permission to step away from the system and step closer towards finding what we really have. Now, for some people, that is going to be the process of grieving. So for some people, that's going to be the process of resting. And for some people, that might be the process of getting really curious and like exploring. And the reason we're doing it on land is because if you've never been to Firing Farm, it's just like the most beautiful, right? Like it's such a breath. And so really being able to do it in this place where we can learn from land actively, where we can notice and be curious around land, I think is a really powerful experience. That's also speaking as somebody who uses gardening as one of the best facilitation trainings I've ever had in my life. Like it's just constantly looking at gardening, looking at what nature does by itself and going, oh, I can mimic that.
I love that you named that piece. I think of things from the framework of relationships, right? And so you're in nature, you're watching nature. And then you can feel how that lives in you and how you are in nature. And how do you also respond to, external stressors? Like, we were talking about, you said something about plants, right? Like a plant will flower. And it'll flower maybe once a year. Maybe it flowers several times, but it has times of dormancy, times when it is closed and times when it pulls into itself. Trees do this, right? Trees have cycles and rhythms, and you also have cycles and rhythms. What are yours? And every person, every human might have a unique needs or unique patterns, rhythms that are natural to them.
And there's an important, and the emphasis that we keep coming back to on rest is because we need to stop the like
Yes.
talk me of the world, to be able to tap into like, what is the way that I do this?
Yes.
Like, what is the way that back to the same, like, what do I need?
Right.
Right. In this, what is the person that is me? What do I need?
Yeah.
And so it's really just us really cultivating the container for people to get what they need. Now, there's also, you know, Isha will be there, I will be there, Erin will be there. We have things to offer as individuals. We have, you know, plans of things that we can give to folks, but really emphasizing self-directed.
Yes.
That this is an experience, that like, this is actually a real life experiment and experience, and what it is to be in space with people and either choose those relationships or choose to like tap into your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And ask yourself repeatedly through the day, what do you need?
Yeah.
So you know, sometimes that might be that the whole circle organically feels like we come back together, but we might not all be together. We might just be like, hey, this is what today is, bye. And you might, you know, go journal for yourself in the woods for, you know, however long you journal with yourself in the woods. And it's intentionally, because we don't know how to do that as people, right? Like that's why we pay to go get trapped on boats so we can relax, right? That's why we take cruises, because we actually don't know how to relax, so we got to go get trapped on a boat.
God, I love that, trapped on a boat. Oh my God, that's how I feel about cruises, but I've never heard anybody describe it like that.
But like, you know, like that's why we do like resort. Like the whole idea of a resort is like, y'all don't know how to relax, so let's trap you in this container. You're not going to be trapped. We're going to be in the wilderness. You'll be able to leave whenever you want to leave. But you know, it's like really intentionally creating a container for folks of that.
Yeah.
And there was another thought that came to me and then disappeared. But yeah, that's like, I'm so excited because, you know, I also think that one of the things the three of us have talked about is just giving permission.
Yeah.
Giving, like, you know, not from a position of authority, but from a position of experience, of saying like, you are allowed to be confused. You are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to be whatever you are.
Yeah.
And just come and be.
Yeah. Say yes to all of it. Say yes to everything that's emerging, even though you might think of it as taboo or make it wrong. Just say yes to everything.
And we're doing it in September. And what I love about, you know, I think that my seasons, as probably a product of growing up in New England, are very weather related. Mm-hmm. And so I've already started my process of harvesting. I like call the fall, like this time is my harvesting time. And I do feel myself in lots of ways like, you know, pulling back.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I'm pulling up roots. I'm coming back into my core and I'm getting ready for my rest. And so this is also a time for me that I do like some self-accountability work around now. Like I do some like just checking in with myself of like, what is it that's happened? What am I picking up and using right now? What am I bringing? Like, what am I making sure that I have prepared for me when I go into my rest, the winter time? Like, what is it? Like, can I just take a breath? Yeah. And again, like capitalism does not let us rest this way. Yeah. But human bodies, even if we think of just agrarian societies, there are periods of rest.
Absolutely.
Farmers are not out in the fields in the winter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so there is a natural, human beings have a natural, whether it is consistent through a day or for a season, like we have natural periods of rest that we have tapped into us. Yes. And they aren't like your 6 days of PTO.
That's right.
So it's really, so this is Unworking and Rewilding is an opportunity to like try and find your rhythm again, or start to discover that.
Yeah. So for you listening, Unworking and Rewilding is happening on Saturday, September 18th. And the form to fill out, to apply, it's pay what you can, will be included in the show notes. Kristianna, thank you so much for being here. This was such a nourishing conversation, and I hope it's been good for you as well.
This was the best way I could ask to start a Monday. So really, thank you for inviting me. And thanks for folks who listen.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.